Are you ready?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to A Shot of Wrestling. This is Riley Shepard, the Gladiator of the Geeks. And today's show, we're going to be talking about my comeback from my ACL injury, sci-fi geekery, and what it takes to be a woman in this business.
Is that the message you got? We about to go live. Are you ready to rock? So take a shot, boy. Is that the message you got? From the fans to the fans, let me hear the crowd pop. So take a shot, boy. Is that the message you got? We about to go live. Are you ready to rock? So take a shot, boy. Is that the message you got? From the fans to the fans, let me hear the crowd pop. So take a shot. Oh yeah. So take a shot. Oh, so take a shot. Oh, so take a shot.
Family, welcome to another exciting edition of A Shot of Wrestling, the interviews. Now, if you have not done so already, make sure you follow us on all forms of social media at Shot of Wrestling, no A, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also contact us via email at inbox@shotofwrestling.com or dial it up 619-343-3005 and leave your comments on A Shot of Wrestling hotline. Now, if you're ready and willing, I'm able, and it's time to start the show. We say it time and time again that wrestling brings us together, and today is no different. Today, we are joined by the Gladiator of the Geeks, protector of the small, and the champion of the outcasts. Riley Shepard, welcome to Shot of Wrestling.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure to include you in our series of interviews right before we get to our big moment, our big 200th episode, because you have been part of our social circle, our wrestling circle, for a little bit over a year now.
Yes, our little family, BCW.
Yeah, in our family of BCW, I had the privilege, but also the tough task to interview you in a moment where you were going to be in Queen of the North, the inaugural show, but then unfortunately, Darius Carter had other plans in mind and you weren't able to compete. So we did have a moment backstage where you let us know that, doctors would not let you compete. And because of that, you went off and had knee surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take us back to that moment and kind of let us know how it felt to be, so young in the game, so much opportunity, so much promise, and then literally just a few years in, having those opportunities taken away from you?
I think the one word to describe it is devastating. I had actually injured my knee slightly the week before at NYCW wrestling for a championship match. And I was able to complete the match and I actually won the women's championship belt. And I was coming into Queen of the North knowing that my knee wasn't 100%. And then when I got called into the ring by Darius Carter, because we had been going back and forth on social media about how Queen of the North is about the women, and he just couldn't get it through his thick skull because, of course, in his eyes, BCW is all about him as the champ.
Right.
So we had been going back and forth on social media for a while, and I guess it finally got to a point where he couldn't stand the fact that I was standing up to him and telling him the truth. So he called me into the ring and he kicked out my knee after throwing a mic at my face, by the way, which was also very rude. And then I kind of had to be carried out by my fellow competitors, or what would have been my fellow competitors. And when I was sitting back with the doctors, they were just like, you can't compete, which for me, I'm the type of person who has gone through injuries. I fractured my knee and I completed the police academy a few years ago. Whenever I'm injured, I kind of grimace and just grit through things. So to have a doctor be like, you're not cleared, so you can't compete. And it was the event that I literally had been looking forward to for months, to be able to share a ring and a stage with these phenomenal women on the independent scene and have a doctor be like, you can't, we're not clearing you. There's no choice. You're not allowed to. And of course, at the point, I don't really know what's going on with my knee. I hadn't gotten an MRI. So I was like, I didn't want to believe them and I didn't want to listen to them, but you have no choice. So when you came back, I was almost in tears
Right.
with the fact that I couldn't compete. And then just a few weeks later, I found out that not only was it a small tear to my MCL, it was my ACL was completely ruptured and like curled in on itself. They showed me a picture on the
Ouch.
MRI. Yeah, they showed me a picture on the MRI and it looked like a little snail. It's like
Oh my
how curled in.
gosh.
Yeah, it was so gross looking. But it was ripped off the femur completely. And the doctor's like, you have two choices. You can either wear a brace and try and continue to go without an ACL, and it may give out on you and you may be out for like a month while it heals, and this will be a continual thing, or you'll get surgery and you'll be out for 9 months to a year. And at this point I had only been wrestling for 2 years. I'm like, there's no way I can't be out for 9 months to a year. That's half of the time I've been wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went with option A, stupidly. I wore a brace and I tried to wrestle for a month in March. I wrestled 4 different matches, including Future of Honor, Shine, against Nyla Rose and Warriors of Wrestling, and against Tasha Steeles was my last one at BCW. And Tasha knew I was a wounded animal. She attacked me like she was a lion going after a wounded animal, completely tore apart whatever little strength I had in my knee, and I got carried out on a stretcher. So at that point, it's like, well, I have no choice. I
Mm-hmm.
need to do this surgery. I need to do this surgery not only for myself, but for the people who I compete with in the ring. God forbid I accidentally injure someone because my knee collapses and then I hurt someone else. That was like the biggest glaring. I was so anxious about it. So end of March, I got my ACL surgery and I was out for 10 months. And devastating, completely devastating.
But then you come back from that injury, and then a new door at BCW opens for you. You were part of the commentary team
Mm-hmm.
for many shows. How was it working with AJ Pan, Pete Rosado, and watching the action and being on a different side of the wrestling guardrail?
And you left yourself out. I got to work with you a little bit too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was actually a really good thing for me, especially at the time. I was a few months after surgery when I got to be on commentary for Brie Combination. And I was in a dark place. I was not happy because I've always been very athletic. And to not be able to be athletic because I literally had one leg taken out from under me, I was not in a good place. And then Cole reach out and say, hey, we have a space for you on commentary. And I was like, yeah, definitely. I'd missed wrestling, but I don't think I knew exactly how much I had missed it until I stepped through the doors at BCW and was surrounded by the roster and watching the crew put up the ring, because I couldn't help, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
my knee. But just having everything come together and being in that atmosphere even before the show, and then once the show started and everything vamped up, it was something I really needed at the time. And I think being on commentary helped me through this process so much more than I could have realized. And on top of it, it gave me an opportunity to learn a skill that I never thought I would be in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helped me a lot to going forward. And hopefully it's something I can keep with me for wrestling and keep doing, maybe do guest appearance on commentary, because I did enjoy it so much, even if AJ is a jerk.
I mean, yeah, I mean, he really is. I don't know. I don't know how you guys were able to work together this past year. You talked about bullies earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and bullies is something you stand up for, and we, as wrestling fans, say, you know, storylines are really important. But I feel like this past year has kind of written itself out for you. Could you take us back on how the bully affected you maybe growing up, and why you feel so strong nowadays to stand up for that bully and to be the voice for others when they don't have that voice?
Yeah, I have always been a huge geek, and I've never been quiet about it. When I was growing up in elementary school, I was probably a little more oblivious to the fact that there were people making fun of me because I had these huge glasses that were like super thick, because I'm legally blind and can't see a thing.
Really?
Yeah. So I've had glasses since I was 5, and I think for a while you're so oblivious and naive to it because you're still innocent. But then you enter middle school and all of a sudden you're acutely aware of people who are popular and people who are making fun of you. And so middle school for me was a really hard time, especially on the bus going to and from school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really when a lot of it happened. I always say, and it's such a weird thing, I hate school buses because you have a bunch of students and then just one adult really who's like watching over everyone, and they can only do so much.
Right.
And so I got extremely bullied when I was in middle school for years, and I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid to tell anyone. I was afraid. I told on one of the guys originally. I told my parents when they were bullying me, and he got taken out of school. And then his friends, a group of guys on the bus, got so much worse.
Wow.
And so in my mind, I felt like I made it worse by actually telling an adult,
Right.
even though that wasn't on me. But to my mind in middle school, that's 1 + 1 = 4 because that's what your brain does in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest time, I didn't stand up for myself, let alone anyone else, because they tormented me for a few years. I guess they got bored and they actually started bullying another girl who was a year younger than me, who was one of my friends. She luckily had the courage to tell her brother, and he went to the principal. And that's when that finally stopped for me, was
Mm-hmm.
because someone else finally stood their ground and told someone, and it went further. And even like the day they got called into the principal's office, one of the boys had come up to me. He's like, please don't say anything. And I felt almost threatened by if I said something to the principal that it would get worse for me.
Right.
And I still didn't tell them all the stuff that they did to me for years. So I think that part of my life, I internalized that so much, the fact that not only could I not stand up for myself, but because I didn't have the courage to say something, it got worse for someone else. And I never wanted to be in that position again, ever. So come high school and then on, whenever I saw anyone getting bullied, whenever I saw someone who felt like they didn't have the courage to use their voice and they felt like they needed to remain silent so that they could be safe, I used my voice.
That's a very powerful message. It's very hard. It's very hard growing up. Where did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Howell, New Jersey.
Okay. I mean, even from New Jersey to New York, something when you were talking to me about the school bus, it really took me back to my school bus days. And you were absolutely right. Like, that is literally one of the toughest environments for someone to be in.
Yeah.
There is no adult supervision. And, those moments, though, may have worked out great for you because you were able to take that negative attention and that bullying and it made you stronger in the end. There's many people out there who it doesn't get any better, and they crouch into those insecurities, into those feelings of,
Yeah.
I could never stand up for the bullies. So thank you, first of all, for growing into being the person that you are and getting to the point where you are standing up for bullies. If you had any message for anybody who's listening, maybe those younger kids out there, teenagers, adolescents who either are a bully or are a victim of bullying, what would you advise them?
I know it sounds super cliche, but it gets better. And it's something that in my darkest time when I was getting bullied, I just felt so alone. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make it stop. But at the end of the day, it took having another person who reached out for help from an adult supervisor. It took them to fix it. And you're not alone. You don't need to isolate yourself. I know there are moments where you may feel that way, but you need to speak to someone, whether it's one of your fellow students, a peer, a bus driver, a parent, whatever it is. You are not alone, and you need to talk to them, and they will help you along this. And at the end of the day, all of these things, it will eventually get better. You just need that supportive group to help you through it sometimes.
Hmm. Now, the big bully in BCW came back for Queen of the North too. Mr. Darius Carter, again, like you mentioned, he knows, he feels, he has this entitlement about him that this company revolves around him and the championship. You weren't scheduled to be in competition. In fact, you were going to make your debut later on that week. But what made you to make your come back early and stand up to Darius Carter?
So yeah, I wasn't planning on having my first match that night at all. It was supposed to be the next day at Work Rate Entertainment. And we had been going back and forth on social media because, of course, it's a year later and he didn't learn anything. It's even though it's Queen of the North and it's supposed to be about the women, he was whining about how his face wasn't on the poster. So of course, we were going back on forth on social media, but during the entire year I had been out and on commentary, he wouldn't leave me alone. Even it wasn't it wasn't enough that he completely annihilated my knee and took me out of the game for 10 months. He needed to gloat. He needed to literally add insult to injury. And he would pie face me. He shoved the belt in my face. He would not leave me alone. And he is the epitome of a bully because he does stuff like that. And it wasn't just me that I watched it happen to. I watched him break Jaden's arm. I watched him kick in Naya's face to the point where her jaw needed to be wired shut. I watched him low blow Montana Black. Like, for a year, I watched him do these things and I literally could do nothing. I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't defend anyone else because I wasn't clear. So when he got on the mic and decided to start saying things again, I knew in that moment that even though I was a little nervous about my knee and the fact that, hey, this is actually the heavyweight champion of BCW who does have a resume behind him and has been winning constantly. And I know all of the shady shenanigans he pulls. I know that he hurt me last time. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I was finally cleared, despite him not knowing that. I needed to be there and I needed to take his head off.
It was a crazy moment. I mean, you guys brawled all over the place. And just when I thought that was enough, and you're coming back from an injury, you went and had a fight. Not just a wrestling match. You guys fought it out, tooth and nails in that match. How did it feel being back, but also being back in such an aggressive way?
I feel like the 10 months that I was out and all of the stuff that happened at BCW with Darius Carter just got so pent up and accumulated, and it just kind of vomited out all in that match. Like, it was just everything that had been building up and building up and building up. And I had 10 months of wanting to literally kick someone's head off, and that someone was him. And finally I could do it. So I'm still bruised. I'm still battered. I unfortunately lost, but at the end of the day, I went toe to toe with the Bree combination heavyweight champion. And I not only did well, I held my own. I stood up to my bully. I punched him in his face. I kicked his head off. I did so much more than that. And even though for him it's all about the title and about how he wants this respect, for me it was the fact that after a year I stood up to the bully, and I may be beaten and bruised, but this time I'm not gone. This time he didn't break me, and I'm going to be back.
So let's talk about that coming back. What is next for you?
So I got all of that, my very first match out of the way and my second match all in the same weekend. I worked for Work Rate. And so it's kind of at this point, I'm going to ride that momentum forward and I'm not stopping. So I have New York Championship Wrestling February 8th, where I'll be in a #1 contendership for the women's title against Kristen DeVille. I have on February 15th, I will be going against Christina Marie at Immortal Championship, who I've actually been wanting to wrestle since the time that I got hurt. We were in a fatal four-way in the actual match that I was injured at NYCW, and I've been wanting to face her one-on-one forever. So that's going to be a good one for sure. I have also coming up American Coliseum Wrestling, February 29th. I have Titan Championship Wrestling March 27th, which is an all-women show in New Jersey, which I'm very excited for. Oh, and I can't forget, because this is one of my favorite places to work besides BCW, is Atomic Championship Wrestling and Rogue Women Warriors, February 28th. I will actually be back there facing Lena Lennox for the women's championship.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're gonna ride. Hopefully, we'll collect some shinies along that way, but we're riding that momentum for sure.
I mean, when you started your career, just a few years in, with so much opportunity, it looks like you're picking up right where you left off. Women's wrestling is a big thing right now. So let's talk a little bit about that and the opportunities you've been given, and where do you see women's wrestling going now? Because I feel at Queen of the North, this is something special. And for the people who have not partaken or seen a Queen of the North, BCW really brings out the best women performers, best women wrestlers in the scene right now, and puts them together in a crazy, amazing show that really pushes the envelope on women's wrestling. So if anybody's listening and you haven't made it out to a Queen of the North show, make sure you make it out to Queen of the North 3, because I'm sure there will be another.
Yes.
But what do you think about the women's revolution and the evolution in today's wrestling scene?
I think we have come leaps and bounds from even when I started watching wrestling, which I was a late bloomer, but we still had the Divas title in WWE, and definitely coming into training where people kind of expected women to not be able to be held to the same standards as men. I feel like we've already come leaps and bounds, but we have so much more to go. So it's one of those things where I'm excited and kind of want to pat everyone on the back who's helped to make it come this far, but I don't want it to let up at all. There's so much more to go. There's so much room in this business that the women's wrestling needs to grow. And also for me, intergender wrestling, both of them, I just want to see grow more and more and more.
Do you still feel like there's obstacles for you women to overcome? Like, if I would speak to a women wrestler 10 years ago, they would talk about, women being valets, escorting guys down to the ring, knowing their place on the card, not having too many opportunities. But now there are full shows dedicated to women's wrestling, full shows dedicated to intergender wrestling. Do you still see obstacles in front of you?
Oh, for sure. I am so excited that there are more opportunities with all women's shows and intergender shows. But at the end of the day, on the independent scene, and actually even in the bigger picture with AEW, Ring of Honor, and WWE, you see that women's matches, there's like maybe one. So especially like in the tri-state area, from my personal bubble and what I see, all us women wrestlers, which there are a lot of us in the tri-state area, are literally vying for 2 spots on a show every single time, because that's all we get. And for us, I wish there was more than just like, hey, we'll throw you the one women's match and that's it. There's no more opportunities for you. You got to go find somewhere else to go. I wish we could be seen the same way as men. We put in the same work. We train with them. I have gone toe to toe for years with men and have not let up. I'm expected to perform the same way, to the same standard. And then to be told by promoters that, hey, sorry, we're filled up because we have 9+ men's matches and 1 women's match. Sorry. For me, that's truly frustrating.
I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit, and I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Oh, boy.
But women's wrestling is big right now, and there's so much great competitors out there. Yourself, Tasha Steeles, Faye Jackson, and the list goes on and on. I'm just naming some talent from BCW, but the list goes on and on. Do you think because there are less opportunities for you. You guys are fine tuning your craft a lot harder to be that top female performer, that top wrestler out there that gets booked, that goes to all these places. And it creates this form of competition where iron sharpens iron. Because I gotta be honest, even though there are more men in shows, sometimes the men that are in the show, they're not at the level of the women because they were just given an opportunity that they may have not earned yet.
I can understand that mentality to a point, and maybe that's just because of my personality. I fight tooth and nail for every single opportunity I have, whether it's a full women's show or whether it's just one match on that show. I train at least 3 days a week. I am constantly in the gym. I am constantly watching wrestling. I am constantly trying to better myself. And so saying that I only get one opportunity and that's what makes me a better wrestler, that's not necessarily true, because at the end of the day, I'm going to make myself the best I can possibly be, because I'm not okay with being complacent or content. I put myself up against everyone, and that's men, women, non-binary. I will face anyone, because at the end of the day, I want to be better for myself. I don't want to be a good for a woman wrestler. I just want to be a good wrestler. Not good. I want to be fan-freaking-tastic.
Yeah. Well,
So it's just kind of the whole mentality of like, well, I got stronger because I was bullied. Well, I wish I wasn't bullied at the end of the day. I wish I
Right.
was just strong on my own merits,
Right.
but that's kind of like the same mentality.
Mm-hmm. I think that the Queen of the North Monsters match pushed women's evolution to the next level, at least in BCW. Becky Lynch recently made a statement about saying that the women's title shouldn't be named the women's title. It should just be a championship, that whether men or female, you should be able to fight for it. Is that a statement you agree in? Like, is that where the women's evolution and women's wrestling is heading towards?
I hope so. I hate labels and division, and I think that's partly I was a sociology major, so that's that's me on a platter. Like, I call it boxes, and I feel like the labels kind of keep us in our boxes and stop us from growing and going forward as a society. And I feel like that's the same in wrestling. Having this division and saying, oh, that's the men's championship, that's the women's championship, it still keeps division and it doesn't have equality in it. And we're not going to be able to have these same opportunities while that division exists. And it goes back to the whole, I don't want to just be an amazing women's wrestler. I want to be an amazing wrestler, and I want to be known as an amazing wrestler. So stop. When I get into the ring, I'm not a woman. I'm a wrestler. And that's exactly what Becky Lynch is saying.
You got into the game, into competition late in your career. In fact, it wasn't your first career. We brought up slightly that you were in the police academy, that you went through injury, but you got through. What made you join the police academy, first of all, but then what also got you away from it and wanted you to pursue this career in wrestling?
I have been wanting to be a police officer since I was 15 years old. I was one of those people who, like, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, and it was a police officer. I really loved the community police officers who worked in my school and worked with students. I felt like it was probably because of the things that I had gone through. I felt like it was such a good someone to branch out to, and someone who could be there for students who were going through hard things. And so I actually went to vocational school for law enforcement, and I did the whole 9 yards, went to college and got my degree in criminal justice and sociology. And I was actually a 911 dispatcher for about 7 years before I got hired to become a police officer in New Brunswick. And so I went through the police academy and did all of that. And I became a police officer when I was 25. I finally graduated. So 10 years later, I achieved my dream of being a police officer. And then I think the biggest part for me was I always loved helping people. I wanted to serve people. I wanted to make them feel safe. And I felt like policing, when I went into it, it was more about enforcement, which I obviously it's called law enforcement. There's going to be enforcement. But I weirdly felt most comfortable helping victims who had gone through domestic violence or sexual assault or acute psychiatric. I wanted to help people. And I felt like policing wasn't doing that. I felt myself doing car stops more, arresting people for marijuana, just things that I didn't enjoy. And it's a hard job. My peers who are still in it, I say kudos to them. That's something that I am forever happy and proud of them for doing. But I found myself just kind of becoming complacent in the job because I wasn't happy, because I didn't feel like I was helping people to the degree that I wanted to. So at that point, I had actually found wrestling, and I started falling in love with wrestling and NXT and the Four Horsewomen. And at the time when I was unhappy with my job in policing, wrestling gave me a light of like, oh, well, maybe this isn't the job that I thought I wanted for the last 10 years. Maybe I can help someone and help the community in a different way. And wrestling became that for me.
We say it on the show time and time again that wrestling brings us together. Now you're part of this family now. Who are you grateful for that wrestling has brought into your life?
Oh, so many amazing people. I think from the very beginning, Gabby Ortiz has always been someone who's been by my side. I trained with her at the Monster Factory, and she is my sister from another mister. I actually love her dad. Her dad makes amazing food, and he's a complete sweetheart. But she is definitely someone I am eternally grateful for having in my life. One of my coaches from the beginning, NXT Damian Priest, I actually got to work with him for about 2 years. That's where I learned a lot of my basics at the Monster Factory was from him. And he was someone who believed in me from the get-go, and it wasn't just like handed to me. It was I had to prove myself. And then he was like, oh, yeah, okay, she's going to work her butt off. And so let's see what we can do with her. And he just invested so much time when he knew that I would put the time and energy in, he was matching it. And he helped to elevate me and start me on my journey. So those are definitely two people that I am eternally grateful for having and that wrestling gave me.
How does your family feel about this new community that you're joining? You know, leaving law enforcement, pretty much having a set career with benefits and a future. In wrestling, it's like really whatever you make of it. You know, the future is unclear, but it's just an opportunity that you're given. How does your family feel about you being in the business now?
Well, now it might be different. I think they were very they were very confused at first when I kind of flipped the switch and went, okay, well, I'm going to policing, which is something they're familiar with, to wrestling, which is literally, I didn't grow up with wrestling. That wasn't in my household. My great-grandfather watched it a little bit, but it wasn't something that my family could identify or understand right away. So I know my mom was extremely nervous for sure. Not only just like the stability of policing and the job benefits, but also the fact that I literally had been trying to be a police officer for 10 years, and then here I am like, never mind.
Right.
So she was a little nervous probably. But yeah, she also was nervous about me getting hurt. And this was before my ACL injury. This was from the beginning. I obviously, with wrestling, you get bumps, you get bruises. I tore my shoulder within like a year of training. So
Wow.
my mom was just kind of nervous about that part of it. But I explained to her, I said, well, I could either be on the street with a gun and a bulletproof vest and not knowing what I'm going to come up against, or I could be in wrestling where at the end of the day, we are a family. We do care about each other. We do try and actually take care of each other. And when I put it in that perspective, I think she finally was like, all right, I'm okay with that then. But yeah, they've been pretty on board. I don't know if you heard at BCW, my little sister was actually there, and
Really?
she was probably the loudest screamer. Like I literally was getting beat up by Darius at one point, and I could pinpoint her voice screaming at him to get away from me.
That's
so,
tough, especially
so
during that encounter. That's tough for a family member to watch.
yeah, I think it may have been tough for her, but at the end of the day, she knows me, and she's like a rugby player, so her and I are kind of cut from the same cloth of like, you have me down and it may seem like I'm out, but I'm going to come up and probably pummel you in like 2 seconds. Like, we just don't give up. So she was just kind of waiting for me to turn it around to Darius. And even now, my little brother, who is also there, he hashtags FUCK Darius on everything. Like, they're so mad. They're like, she should have won. She was going to kick you. Like, it was a whole thing.
Wow. Yeah.
But they're totally supportive of it. And they were there. And I'm so glad they were there for my first match back, for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that you are also the gladiator of the geeks. I feel like the geeks are taking over wrestling. You know, it's a cool thing to be a geek. So I have to ask you, other than wrestling, what do you geek out to?
I am a complete science fiction or sci-fi geek, and I am a book nerd. I have always loved books since I can ever remember. I would get grounded all the time, and so the only thing I got to have in my room were books. So I grew up with books as my friends. So those are definitely two things that I am a complete and utter geek about.
Is there a series of books that you were really into that hold a dear place for you in your heart?
Growing up, for sure, Goosebumps.
Oh, I love Goosebumps.
Yes, especially the pick your own adventure one. Did you ever read those?
So I gotta be honest, I never was a big reader, and I'm still not to this day. But when I was growing up and you had like things to read, or they gave you like a list, you gotta put books to read for the summer. Goosebumps were my like go-to. They were just like really cool. So pick your own adventure. Tell us about that.
Yes, I died a lot. I was really bad at it, like so bad at it. But I really probably attribute to my sci-fi nerdom and the fact that I love RPGs or role-playing games for video games. Totally had to have come from Goosebumps, because
you gateway drug, Goosebumps.
Yeah, because it wasn't just reading. Like you actually were making choices. I was making bad choices apparently and dying a lot back then. I've gotten better with RPGs, at least, where I don't die nearly as much. But yeah, it was definitely, that was my favorite. That and Harry Potter, which I was so much of a geek about that I would not only be reading on my bed, but I actually had the audiobooks playing while I was reading, because that's just how far and deep I go into this.
What do you think of the movies? Did they do justice to the books?
I think I just kind of kept them separate. They're separate entities to me.
Okay.
I enjoyed them both for what they were. I'm completely aware that books, for me at least, are an escape. Back then when I was younger, that's kind of what I used them for. I got away from my world and went into the world of the book. Whereas I feel like movies can only do so much justice to that, because that escapism is kind of done through your brain and what you are fantasizing in your mind. Like the words are on the book, but you're picturing it in your brain, and the way you picture it in your brain isn't necessarily going to come out on movies. That's someone else's vision. So I enjoyed the movies for themselves. I grew up with the movies, so I felt like I was growing up with Harry Potter, both with the books and the movies. And for that, I love it. I love them both.
Well, this business is filled with so many surprises. Who would have thought 2 years into this career, you would have gotten injured? 10 months later, you'll be coming back, and your first match back, get an opportunity at the BCW Championship. You, like I said earlier, you picked up right where you left off, and you are going 110 miles an hour, and I love it. Is there anything that you want any of our fans listening, any of your fans listening, that you want them to know about the Gladiator of the Geeks?
Just where they can maybe find me on social media and follow my journey and my adventures, because there's going to be a lot of them going forward. I am on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at the Riley Shepard, and I also have a website, RileyShepard.com, where I post all of my photos and my matches and my upcoming events. That's all of my social media. And then at the end of the day, the only thing I kind of want to leave a message for people is that as the Gladiator of the Geeks, I stand for everyone who feels like they are a geek or an outcast or feel like they can't say anything. And I am always there and available if you want to message me or DM me or anything, any platform. If you feel like you need someone to speak to, you feel a little lost, you feel a little alone, I'm here. And also come say hi to me on intermission if you come to any of my shows.
Riley, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of A Shot of Wrestling. I'm looking forward to seeing you a lot more in the upcoming years. But stay tuned,
thank you so much.
because there's still last call.
This is Riley Shepard, the Gladiator of the Geeks. Stay tuned so you can hear Last Call.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I need to announce it's last call at the bar.
All right, everybody, we have made it to the end of the episode, and that's last call, and we're still here with the Gladiator of the Geeks, Riley Shepard. Now, Riley, this is how you play last call. It's rapid fire questions, and the first thing that comes to your mind is the first thing you should answer. Are you ready?
I hope so. I babble, so this will be fun.
Well, then away we go. Where's the furthest you've ever traveled for wrestling?
I haven't actually gone too far. The furthest I've probably gone is going to be Vermont. I did a 3-day tour with World of Hurt, and we made our way up through New York and Vermont and almost to the Canada border, but we didn't cross over. That was really cool, though.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
I worked at a deli counter in Stop and Shop. People are very particular about their lunch meat, and when someone says they want lunch meat shaved, it is a pound of that. You are there for like a half hour, but it's a good arm workout.
Oh, my. Which fictional character would you like to wrestle?
There is a character in Dresden Files who is actually a police officer, and she is completely badass, and I would love to fight her.
What is your favorite adult beverage?
Sangria, probably. I'm more of a not alcohol or mead. Ooh, I like mead when I go to Ren Fairs. That one trumps sangria, actually. Mead.
All right. Other than wrestling, what is your favorite sport?
Gymnastics. I've done that from the time I was 7 to 18, and it also helped with wrestling.
What is the best cosplay you've ever pulled off?
I actually haven't done too much cosplay. I've been a medieval bar wench and a Pokemon trainer. Other than that, the most cosplay I do is wear armor in wrestling.
What is your motto in life?
I think my motto in life now is it gets better. When I was younger, I was bullied a lot. And so I actually have a tattoo that I wrote in my own font on my foot, and it says it gets better, because for a long time I was in a very dark place, and it did eventually get better. I got stronger. I surrounded myself with more positive people. And now whenever I find myself in that dark place again, I just kind of look at that tattoo and I remind myself that I've been through a lot already and I can keep pushing forward.
What's your favorite karaoke song?
I'm going to be oh, you know what? Lion King. I like Lion King. What is that song? I'm going to be a mighty king.
Oh, I love that song.
Oh, yeah. Disney is my favorite. I love Disney.
Who is your celebrity crush?
This is going to be a weird one, and no one else will probably agree. David Tennant is my crush. He was the bad guy in Jessica Jones, and then because of that, I watched Doctor Who, and I completely fell in love with him in Doctor Who as the 10th Doctor.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen in wrestling?
There are a lot of weird things. I don't even know if I can prioritize that one. I'm gonna say Stan Styles with his shake weight and his whipped cream. I'm completely amused by him, but it might be one of the weirdest things that I've seen so far. But I'm sure there's other things I'm not thinking of.
That's right.
Right?
Final question. Now, if your career ended tomorrow, what would you like to be remembered for?
I would like to be remembered for giving people a different view of women wrestlers, especially children who are little girls who see women and are told constantly by social media and society that they have to look a certain way. And I'm not one of those people who's model. I know I'm pretty, but I am tough, and I am someone who revels in her strength, and there are completely different types of body types for women. And I want to be that kind of a role model for little girls who say, hey, she looks like me and I can do what she does.
Riley, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of A Shot of Wrestling. I know we have many more years together. I want to thank you for participating and supporting us every step of the way. We love you, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much.
Hey baby, I hear the bell ringing, hip tosses and body slams. Oh my. And maybe you seem a bit confused, yeah baby, but I got you pinned. Ha 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 ha. But I don't know what to do when I see them with that golden case. They're cashing it in. Authority all in my face. What is a man to do? Good night, everybody.